podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Can we use immersive and emerging technologies to help heal and save the planet? Well, on this podcast, I'm talking to Juliano Calil. He is the founder of Virtual Planet Technologies and a pioneer in science communications. His work and academic research are more motivated by urgent need to reduce climate change impacts by adopting equitable solutions through inclusive community engagement. Juliano and his team are developing interactive virtual reality VR experiences to communicate climate change impact solutions to diverse audiences. So without any further delay, I'd like to welcome Juliano. Hey, awesome, man. Julian, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to talk to someone who is very much using this immersive technology for good. And I'd like to kind of just first understand in your own words, could you please describe to people exactly what you do so the audience is aware of it?
Great. Thanks for having me, Dylan. It's great to be here. So we've been for a couple of years now developing this virtual reality experiences and immersive. And during the pandemic, we expanded a little bit to 360 films. But the idea is that we go to community events. We always partner with cities or NGO or specific communities to show some of the issues that they're facing or they're likely to face in lieu of climate change. We also put some solutions in the experiences, and then we present it to the public at this event. And the idea is that we bring the headsets. There's usually a conversation with a community leader or someone that's engaged in actually solving some of these issues on the ground. So we put the headsets on folks, and these experiences, they're designed in a way that you're transported to this virtual room. And we try to make this very appropriate for the location. So I live in Santa Cruz, California. We're kind of a funky beach town here. So when you go to the Santa Cruz experience, you're in this very colorful beach house with surfboards kind of hanging. So we try to bring that cultural sense of place too for folks that live there, so they feel kind of, oh yeah, this is Santa Cruz. I know what I'm looking at. And then we have these views that we include in VR. One option is 3D models. I love, drones, photogrammetry, and we can talk a little bit about the process of creating these things. But you see in front of you a desk with a 3D model of a coastal location that folks are familiar with, and then you can interact with it and raise sea levels. You can activate coastal erosion lines to see where the projected shoreline is going to be in the future. You can also click and see some potential solutions. So maybe we can build a seawall to protect some of the properties. But that kind of has some drawbacks where eventually as sea levels rise, you end up losing the beach. Or you can add more sand and sand dunes. So we always try to incorporate some of the solutions so folks can discuss them and look forward to what's to come. And then after they go through the experience, we stay at the events, we have conversations with them, and that usually leads to more meetings and discussions going forward. So.
Got it. Okay, cool. So then a lot of this is awareness and doing the thing around the local activities of the group. So if there's Santa Cruz, there's things around the water and the beach side. So you do a lot of communications around there, and then you're then partnering with like the local groups to like, how do you understand what the needs and how do you really understand the solutions that are available?
So yeah, that's something that we take great care on, is to not come up with some like wild fantasy of something that cannot be implemented. So we really try hard to base all our experiences on science. So we look at the climate models, downscaled predictions of sea level rise that takes into account how the land is moving too. So every place is a little different, but also the local context, right? One of the things that we learned on our second experience, and then it's been the same, is like every location is very different. So this local context is really, really important because not every city is facing the same impact. So Santa Cruz, we see some of the impacts, but we're not getting flooded every day like some places on the East Coast when there's high tide or there's like what's called nuisance flooding, which is like just at high tide every other week or something, you get some parts of the city that are flooded. So we'll try to base the hazards and the flood projections on science. And also it's the same with the solutions. So there are places when if you have a cliff that on the water, you can add a sand dune to that. That wouldn't make sense because it just that habitat doesn't allow for that. So we try to look at what specific things the cities are planning for. And in some cases, when the cities don't have that already identified, we looked at similar locations as examples of what could be done. But one of the things that we're just tapping into now is that every decision we make with climate change has a trade-off. You can't win on all fronts. So if you do one thing, something's got to give on the other end. So we're trying now to communicate what those trade-offs are in better ways, and also dealing with the uncertainty related to climate, which sometimes gets used to, oh, we don't know what's going to happen. We know where things are going. The trends are very clear, but we don't know that, in March of 2047 at 10 a.m., the sea level is going to be at this elevation, right? We know it's going to be higher than today by an amount. So we try to include all of that into how we write the script and deliver these experiences as well.
Got it. So then a couple of things, when you're looking at, you're writing the script, you're saying, okay, there's trade-offs. There's always going to be some sort of trade-offs that happen, right? Can you, talk to me just a little bit of an example of what one of those trade-offs are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked on a couple of studies in the last few years looking at cost-benefit analysis of different adaptation options. So there's some examples that we can talk about. We did one project was looking at comparing building a seawall with adding more sand to the beach periodically as sea levels rise and the coast is eroding, versus even relocating folks from the coastline eventually when it gets too expensive and the flooding is too frequent to keep some of the houses at some locations, right? So the trade-offs there are going to be, if you add more sand and you have sand dunes, you maintain that habitat, you maintain that wide beach, which has great economic value, right? People come to places like Orange County and in California here and other places to really enjoy the beach, and that they stay at the hotels, and so that the economic benefit is great. Versus if you put a seawall, you end up protecting the property that's behind that seawall, but with time, as the tides come in and sea levels are rising, the way that the waves interact with that seawall, it means that there's some sand is pushed offshore, and then you end up losing that beach. So when you do that, and then you protect the property, but you lose that recreational value. Going back to the sand replenishment, sometimes the issue there is that as sea levels rise, you're going to have to make those projects more frequently. My grad student advisor used to say, his name is Gary Griggs, a great geomorphologist that's an expert in this area, used to say, if the sand is not staying on that beach naturally, why do you think that if you put it there, it's going to stay? So it's not. So those natural processes kind of continue. And then finally, if you want to compare with maybe relocating folks from the coast, it's a very controversial issue. I don't think we're even ready to talk about it at the community level in many places yet, but we're hinting at that in some of our experiences too, with some surprising findings here that we can talk about. But the idea there is, if you move folks away from the coastline, you're changing that neighborhood sense of place. A lot of these homes are multi-generation. So the people grew up there, their parents might have grown up in these areas. And then economically, you end up losing your property taxes as well. But then you don't have the costs of protecting the properties and doing the things. So all those things kind of come into play, and it's really hard to get to a consensus, especially in places where the issue is not happening every single day, right? It's something that we're planning for the future, because in some places we still have some time to plan, but since it takes time to implement these things, I think now is the time to really think about it.
So, you're really looking from the community perspective. How does it impact the community? How does it impact the local people that are living there? And what does that shape like now? You primarily focused on the beach areas along the sea there, or the entire ocean itself, or where are the main areas do you focus on to have awareness and impact?
Yeah, so this kind of endeavor started with sea level rise. It actually started, I was going through grad school here in Santa Cruz, studying ocean sciences. And we'll have this Friday meetings where, we'll bring this very prominent scientists. We're invited by our advisors and the professors to talk about their science. And we'll be sitting in the room every Friday and listening to them. And I went through a big case of imposter syndrome. I was like, well, I'm not smart to be here. I don't understand half of what these folks are saying. And unless you were in that specific field, folks were having a hard time really following what was being said. So during that kind of the studies, I thought, well, we need a better way to talk about these things. And with all the climate change issues and really not getting traction in climate mitigation, reducing emissions, and even adapting to some of the efforts, I thought, well, we need to do better. And then I've always been a tech guy, so I was flying drones. I've been flying drones for, I think almost 10 years now. And then I was out on the coast with the drone taking some photos. And then I had this thought, like, wow, it would be great to use this as a decision support tool, right? Can we use this great images, 3D models, and bring it into this? So that was a long answer to say we started with sea level rise, and we did projects here in Santa Cruz, Long Beach, Turner Station in Maryland near Baltimore. We did another great project here in Elkhorn Slough, that's between Monterey and Santa Cruz, looking at sea level rise on impacts on Highway 1, and really showing the idea that depending on how we adapt the highway, that will have an impact on ecosystems that are just behind the highway, right? As you drive up in California and coastal states, you see that there's a marsh on one side, and there's some wetlands, and there are all these things. So if you raise the highway to make it still viable with sea level rise, it impacts all those things. So we developed this experience with a department like Caltrans here in California, and then some conservation organizations to really try to bring those topics together, right? How we do that. But then the last couple of years, we kind of migrated inland a little bit. We continue to do those projects. We have 3 or 4 now kind of being worked. But we also expanded a little bit to look at wildfires. So we developed a film. It's a 360 film about the Camp Fire, the 2018 that devastated Paradise here in California. And then we did a really cool experience, like a 360 film about urban heat in Cleveland. And now we're finishing up a project here with the Santa Cruz Land Trust, looking at a wildlife corridor under a highway. So we did an experience that you can actually see the land being transformed, the animals crossing. So it's been kind of expanding to other issues as well. And it's been really interesting to work with different groups and try to address some of these things, right?
I think some of these environmental issues sometimes feel overwhelming for individuals to be able to feel a part of. They feel like, oh my God, that's so big. I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to keep my own head above water and keep going. I mean, what are the, tactical, practical things people could do in order to have a positive impact, let's say on the oceans or any of these areas that you're focused on?
Yeah, that's something I keep in mind all the time, Dylan. Even from my own kind of sanity check, sometimes I keep thinking, because this is just, I can't solve climate change. I can't solve, but there is a little bit that I can do, right? So I always think of this in terms of what's my sphere of influence, right? That's the term that people use. Like, what people can I reach, and what can I maybe inspire one person here, another one there. I think that's what I can do, and hope that trickles down. So I part of that led for us to expand our team quite a bit. It started with me as kind of the climate science guy, and then a colleague, my co-founder, Paulo Salvatore, he's like the VR guru. And then we kind of, okay, can we build an app here and put something in VR that people can use? And then we kind of, okay, we can do this, but we need some help. So we reached out to the city of Santa Cruz. I was working on a project with them, and they helped us kind of develop our first experience so they could use during their outreach process. And then during that process, we found, we had one case of a lady on the East Coast that she put the headsets on, and she had experienced flooding in the past. And the image was so realistic to her that it triggered some past trauma. And then we're like, we spent a lot of time with her after that, but we thought, well, we need a psychologist in the team as well. So we brought someone that helps us with that. And then more recently, about a year ago, we brought a script writer, a film director, someone with a documentary experience that helps us to really write up all those experiences. So we kind of add all that in. And but I think our question was more about what folks can individually do, right? Not what we. But yeah, on that, one of the things we found through all these interactions with these folks and is what gets people to move, right? How do you get people engaged, and how do you maintain them engaged with the topic? And some of these things are really tricky. And with sea level rise, what we found is that having the virtual reality experience really enhance that engagement levels with the project. So I've been in sea level rise planning meetings before where we had two big 2D maps, like those Google images with blue areas and showing the flooding. And people come in and look and then leave, and that was it. Now, when we bring in the headsets and they actually get to experience what that could look like in the future, they stay longer in the events. They get more engaged. That at the moment, all our events end up running late. We get more attention, more people want to see it because, as you know, VR is still novel enough to most people that they see the headset. Oh, what is that? I want to line up. I want to see that. So we attract a different crowd as well. And what we try to do is that during the projects is to bring people into an existing process whenever possible. So if the city is running like workshops or hearing sessions and things, we point people to that. And one of the things we're finding is that having those interactions and making them frequent enough that people feel that they're making a little difference, even if it's just I'm learning a little bit, I'm talking to a friend, and that little positive reinforcement, I think that seeing that little result of that small action is helping to keep people coming back and staying engaged. But also, this is something very new for us, Dylan. We're fundraising to do some research, and we have a great partnership with the team at Stanford, the Virtual Human Interaction Lab. And we have about 3 or 4 graduate students at the moment that are using some of these experiences to track exactly what you're saying. How can maybe VR help to keep people engaged with these issues? But in general, what I'd say is like, that's what I applied for myself. Is if you find something that you're passionate about, that you like to do, that you enjoy doing it, and connect that through that work tied to climate, try to maybe a conservation issue that you care about. And that could be anything, right? It could be writing, could be art, could be psychology, whatever it is. So if you just apply that stuff that you like to those topics, I think that will keep people more engaged. But it's a tough question, right? If we knew that, I think we'll be in a better spot. I think more on the
well, and that's what's really overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming to say, okay, you're gonna try to save the entire ocean, and you do feel like a drop in the ocean when you go and stare at it. So, like, what is it that people can do? I mean, what you're talking about is you find what are the local initiatives of the community, and then you direct them towards that. So there's Santa Cruz, yeah.
Yeah, we do that, and yeah, that's one of the main ways that we've been doing it. Really through our experiences and the events, and also sometimes we find that builds community as well when people start talking about that issue. So having someone that they trust, kind of on board with them, I think it's a big part of it. I think that's one of the. There's a lot of scientists that are creating this communities, right? Of just to connect with one another and kind of share their experiences, or we're having a rough day. It's like, this is I'm feeling this way. How do you kind of name that, own it, and then kind of move on from that space, right?
Yeah. I mean, are you building communities with what you have as a solution, or is it something that you're facilitating community connections based upon the location? So what I mean by that is, like, do you have a virtual planet community, and if so, what do they do and where do they hang out? Or is virtual planet someone that actually you create these experiences and then you just connect them to the local communities?
We're doing the latter. So we're at the moment just we create and then we connect with them, and then we stay engaged to some, like I just talk to the colleagues in Santa Cruz, which we did the experience. I think it was, I think nearly 2 years ago, and it was on the news last week. So we're like, oh, let's reconnect here. We are starting to create a small community of the graduate students that are interested in using VR and doing research about virtual reality and environmental literacy, climate change, sea level rise, and those issues, because it's there are not many of us doing that kind of research. So it's great to connect. We just had our first meeting maybe a week or so ago. There were like 6 of us. So we're looking at expanding that. I think it would be great.
Yeah. So you're pulling on research grads that have primary interest in, both this immersive technology and helping save the planet. How do people find out about that? How do people get engaged in something like that?
So there are different ways. The folks that we're working with, there's a student from University of Delaware. She just, I don't even know how she found us. I think it was online, and then she just emailed me. It's like, hey, this is great. I'm thinking of incorporating this into my research. Can we chat? So we just talked, and then talked to her advisor, and then they had a little bit of funding that we could use to create a mini, like a version of our experiences specifically tailored to their study. So we're working on that. There was another student here from San Jose State near us that saw the experience. I think it was we had it at the local public library for about 10 weeks, which was really cool. More than, I think, 400 people tried that experience. They just checked out the headsets and went through it. So I think he found out about that, and then he worked with his advisor, and they just came up with a research question that would, because they didn't have the budget to create a specific tool, they just used ours. And then he's writing up now his findings, looking at the impacts of that VR experience on the Latinx community at a neighborhood here, which is like the low income, mostly Spanish speaking, and it's the most vulnerable coastal location in the whole county here in Santa Cruz too. So there are different ways that people reach out. And
when you say most vulnerable, are you talking, is the Latin community the most vulnerable, or is it the beaches of Santa Cruz that's the most vulnerable? Can you explain
so that's where all of that overlaps. And that's one of the things that this work I'm very passionate about, is that it's very multidisciplinary. So the first project I did with the city of Santa Cruz, we were looking at the climate adaptation plan. So looking, well, what areas are going to get flooded, what erosion, which coastal areas are suffering the most erosion, and all of that. And then we were chatting, it's like, well, there's also the human side of this, right? So you can see this whole area is flooded, but if no one lives there and there doesn't, maybe that's okay. Now you have this little area here that could get flooded, and it's a low income community, then we should probably focus on that first. So here in Santa Cruz, through that project, we found out that the most socially vulnerable neighborhood in town, in the county here, and probably around the Central Coast too, is also the most vulnerable to sea level rise and coastal flooding. So that kind of compounds that issue of climate impacts. So, yeah.
And then I don't know if it was touched on, but when you talked about how people find these types of communities that are interested in it, do they Google search it? Is it specifically, do they reach out to you? Like if someone's interested in using this high technology and they do it for good, are there online communities that they can be a part of, or what does that look like?
That is still kind of emerging. I think we don't have one yet. I think a lot of the work is done. I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. That's something because we're kind of small still, and we're growing, but we still don't have the capacity to have something like that. Even like we don't have just to give an idea, we don't even have like a sales team yet. We're kind of looking into that and how can we expand and democratize, the tools to get more people even using. So we've been focusing on the last about 6 or 7 months of redeveloping our backend platform so we can develop a lot more of these projects at the same time. So we're nearly to the point where we can say, okay, let's unleash this and see, how many of this can we really take on. But it's been so far it's been mostly word of mouth, and someone sees the experience that they're interested in, and they come in and say, oh, can you do one for us? And we've been very fortunate that that kept us really busy for the last couple of years. But we're really thinking of, okay, we need to take this to the next level, and there's no reason why maybe we should do 30 of this, 40, not like 7 or 8 as we've done so far.
Got it. So right now you're building out some of the back end technology, i.e., being able to kind of cut and paste more of these applications for more of these communities, and just like one community at a time, spinning it from Santa Cruz to Laguna Beach, or down the line. Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
That's the goal.
Got it. What's a fact or something that you think is underrepresented or people may not be aware of that's currently going on with the issues with climate change and the oceans and that?
Yeah, I think the whole, and it's getting more talked about, thankfully, but still we have ways to go, is the idea of equity and climate justice. I think it's something that's coming to the forefront, and it's something that we really want to address more through some of these experiences. But this idea is, when you look at areas that are low income, they're typically also suffering more urban heat than other areas because of lack of investment on parks and green spaces and things like that. So I think bringing attention to some of those, how do we prioritize, I think, what do we take care of and how we do that, I think it's an area that needs more attention too, because we have limited resources too, right, to tackle these things. And that's, I think the climate is one crisis that we're dealing with. There are others that competing, for this limited resources. So how do we prioritize, how we make decisions? And there was the latest IPCC report, the International Panel on Climate Change. Every 5-6 years they come up with their assessment, right? I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago they come up with the 5 things we can do to keep emissions under the levels we need, so temperatures don't rise above maybe 3 degrees or 2.7, I think was the number. None of them talked about people and decision making and policies to actually implement the solutions that we need. So I think that piece is still missing, and we really need to. I mean, there are people doing this, but not nearly enough. Like, how do we make decisions about these issues in ways that will reduce future impacts? I think it's
What are the 5 things that people can do? What was it? Do you know? Can you think of them?
I
don't mean to put you on the spot, but
no,
I'm going to put you on the spot.
I read them earlier today, but I'm drawing a blank here. But I'll come up with.
You can riff on it. Maybe we get 3 out of 5.
Yeah, it's really reducing emissions, of course, right?
Okay.
And then, but there's also a big thing from this report is that's not going to be enough. We need technologies to sequester CO2 from back, kind of suck it back from the atmosphere, to reduce that. I think there's reduced deforestation and some other. Yeah, I think those are the big ones. But the interesting thing about that is that we know what we need to do. We have the technology, and we know what needs to happen. It's just getting the political will to really get there that's been kind of tricky, right?
Yeah. So we understand what we need to do. We just don't have the will to do it. What do you think is what would need to change, or what's roadblocking us from actually taking that critical action?
Yeah, I think it comes down to money in the end. I think there's, we really need to decarbonize, and the way we do is really important. We have to move away from burning fossil fuel like yesterday, but there's such a strong industry and lobbying that goes on. It's really hard to do that. If you look at the subsidies that we have with oil, even though we have, alternatives, it's really hard to pass any legislation that really significantly reduces that in the time that we have. So I think that is, to me, I think is one of the big roadblocks. I worked on a research project a couple of years ago looking at the impacts of plastic pollution on ocean and looking at communities that are low income around the globe. And through that, we found out that it all also ties back to the oil industry in a way, because they're seeing the writing on the wall that the demand for oil for transportation and heating and other things because of climate change is reducing, but plastic production is going through the roof. So they're like, oh, let's use all that oil to make more plastic. So that it's kind of getting us to the other end on the climate as well, not to mention the pollution, that's the issues with pollution and human health that are coming to light, other things. So I think that to me is the biggest challenge. It's like, how do we really move away from that and let the renewable energies kind of technology and the solutions that we have already mapped really just flourish and be replicated everywhere. And
yeah, I heard something about they did a study, and they actually found that a lot of us have a bunch of microplastics floating around our blood.
Yeah,
and yeah, maybe that will motivate us from stop using plastics. If we won't do it for the ocean, maybe we'll do it for ourselves.
That would be great. That would be great. But that was one of the other things that we found in the report is that's the industry strategy of putting the burden on the consumer is really working, because now we feel terrible that we don't recycle or we're not doing it right, or maybe someone gave me a straw. Oh my God, that. But really, I think the way to do it is by changing policies. If you write one policy saying no more, plastic bags, the impact of that is going to be way, way higher than anything we can do to change consumer behavior, I think, especially if there's no alternative for things like that. And the other thing is this idea of enterprise research, ERP. Oh, I'm drawing
ERP? Enterprise research papers?
No, it's a responsibility. Oh, good. It will come back to me. But there's this idea that if soda company produces 8 billion bottles of something in 1 year, and that just puts it out, and then it's someone else's problem with like the end of what would happen with that bottle at the end of its life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is to bring that responsibility to the producer.
So enterprise responsibility practice or something.
Yeah. So that I think needs to be part of it too, right? If I generate the trash here at my house and I throw it on the street, I get a fine, right? So it's kind of similar to that. So bringing back that to more like producer side.
The challenge with that one is you're looking at the cop out for every major enterprise is like, I have a fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders, and so that's why I make plastics. That's why I do child labor in another country. That's why I do this. And that's one of the biggest things that seems to come up again and again is a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders to increase the profit of the company. That's why I throw millions of dollars at lobbyists to make sure that plastic bags stay, because I make petroleum and I need to show that my stock prices go up. We have a need for this weird progress thing. So, what is the answer to that? I don't know.
I think that's been the argument, but I think it's really short-sighted because if your consumers won't be around because that whole area is going to be burning every summer, or sea levels are rising and you're going to have climate refugees everywhere, then you're saying, you're kind of locking that fiduciary responsibility to the next 3, 4, 5 years, and that's not sustainable as we're seeing. So if you think of that consumer and that sustainable business being around for another 100 years, you definitely have to account for those things. And the other part that I think it's missing, and we're talking about it and it's getting better, is really this idea of what we call externalities, which is like when you produce coal, you burn some CO2 that goes into the atmosphere. That has an impact and it has a cost to the planet, but that's not included in the accounting of the company that's producing that impact. So when you put CO2, it goes off, it's someone else's problem. When we have, like we have in California now, a cap and trade scheme on carbon emissions, just far from ideal, but it's a start, where now they have to, I have a limit of how much I have to pay for it. So now there's a cost associated with that will impact their bottom line. So there is an incentive even from that standpoint to reduce their impact, so their costs go down. And renewables are, we know they provide better jobs, better paying jobs. And I was really shocked to learn about the size of the coal industry in the US, how many jobs it had. I think it was about...
I have no idea.
It's about 60,000 workers, 60,000 people.
Oh, wow. That's a very small amount.
It's a very small amount, but they're really loud. And the lobby is so strong that if we could retrain those folks to install solar panels, it's a way better job than being on a coal mine, right? So it's like
they probably has turned a lot of those practices into digitized facilities and things like that. It's like turning a farm that you take so many farmers to plant an acre of land. Now you got one dude who's got a tractor and robots that clip the weeds that grow in the garden. So that's probably why it's down to such a small amount. It's not the retraining those people, it's the people that run the coal businesses that then want to make sure that they can stay employed, they want to keep their money engine rolling.
The jobs become kind of an excuse to, we can let
60,000 jobs, man. That's barely even, that's like a city in LA. That's nothing. What let me ask you this, in terms of like what you've been creating, what have you seen that have some of the biggest impacts on some of the applications that you've seen? Do you have any specific stories that you can share about by using this technology and some of the impact that you've seen?
Yeah, I have a couple. I think a lot of the impacts are like personal, the way we see people reacting to this. And I'll start telling by my own impact, like how I've been impacted to this. And you use VR as well. So, a lot of people I speak with, and when we talk about VR in meetings and things, there's that visceral moment when you're doing something in VR where it kind of hits you in a way that you say, oh, now I get it. I understand now what the hype's all about and how this thing really is different. And to me, that came when we were doing the Turner Station project, which was the idea. It's a community park called Fleming Park. It's just outside of Baltimore on the Chesapeake Bay. Very low-lying area. Just to give you an idea, when it's windy, when the winds pick up, the parts of the town end up flooding just from that kind of the little wind waves that come through. And there's some areas that don't even have like a storm drain because they're so flat and near the water that they wouldn't make any difference. So we were working on that project about 2.5 years ago, looking at the park and what would happen, and projecting up to 6 feet of sea level rise through the years. And then I sent we used the NOAA's sea level rise data, and then I sent the artist that works with shout out to Gianluca, his amazing digital artist. I sent the image to him, and then he's looking at Google like Maps, and then he's digitizing this 360 image to replicate the flooding, right? And then he sent it back to me. I put it on my headset, and I'm looking down and taking it off, comparing, and everything looked good. And then I looked to the right, and I forgot to tell him that there was a neighborhood in the area that wasn't part of our scope. So he ended up doing the flooding for the houses as well. And then I remember that feeling. Like I looked to the right, it's like, holy, I was like, what? We're doing this whole project talking about this park, but there's like, hundreds of houses here just next door that are being flooded. It's like, and we're not talking about that. It's like something is not right. So and we had a long conversation with the project, with the community. And then we decided to maintain that image, even though the whole story was still about the park. Mm-hmm. But eventually our local partners there, there's the Nature Conservancy, there's the Turner Station conservation teams, even the port in Baltimore, they were all part of it. And then they were able to fundraise and get a significant amount of money to do a study now about the neighborhood. And it wasn't just because of that image, but I think it really helped to see that, because we built the case like, guys, you got to look into this area. So that to me was a big impact personally, and also I think to that community, because now the first trip I took after the pandemic, or it's not over yet, but recently, the first time I left my town for the last couple of years, it was to go back to the neighborhood, to fly the drones and collect all the data, looking at the neighborhood. So that was a huge thing for me.
So you were able to actually see like the unintended consequence of the flooding of the park areas. There's actually a neighborhood attached, and then you realize, oh crap, it's not just this park, it's all these people as well. And that's something that we have, but we don't recognize it until we're actually standing in the middle of it, and you just look and you visually connect the dots.
Absolutely. And having this realistic images, it makes a huge difference. I can tell every project we go through this, I ask the city or the partners, what sea level rise scenarios are you using? And they send us the maps and and then we digitize them, we make them, render them in 3D and on 360. And then we send them the images, and it's like, oh no, this is wrong. It's not this bad. I was like, it's the same thing. It's just looking at it in a different way. But you've been using this for the last 10 years on your planning. It's not like, but this is what it means in reality. So, and that creates I think enhances the sense of urgency. It's like, oh, we really got to get on this, which is great. And I think that's where the technology really plays, I think, a big role here, because I like to say this is not about VR. It's not about tech. It's really about that process on the ground, about people making these decisions. The tech is kind of an aid, like it's a supporting tool to this process. It's a critical one, and I think in some cases it's really necessary. But without that other piece, also it's kind of hard to get anything going. I think some places, when we show Santa Cruz to someone that lives here, the reaction is way different than if I show this to someone that lives on the East Coast. When you have that sense of place, that local personal connection to the place, that creates a whole different level of engagement and reaction.
Got it. So, I mean, you're talking about they see the numbers as like, oh, this raises at 5 feet, but they don't understand that 5 feet actually goes and floods an entire house, and has catastrophic effects. That's one of the pieces. What I want to talk about, because you kind of stepped into it a little bit as you're just talking about just happenstance, is talk to me about what are the steps or the phases from you having people and creating partnerships with some of these groups, these sustainable groups. What does it look like from being strangers to actually working together? Can you talk me through the different phases of that process?
Yeah, and that's that's evolving every project. But and I think the project we did in Long Beach is a great example, where we were approached by our partners at the Nature Conservancy. It's like, well, we're engaged with this community. We're going to have this series of events where we're going to talk to the residents, and we think showing them in VR some of the scenarios and some adaptation options will really be a good contribution to the project. Can you work with us? And that was like, sure, let's do it. And one of the things that we found through this project is it takes a long time to build that relationship, right? So if I show up to this event and I was like, well, this Brazilian guy that's doing VR, I have a kind of a funny accent sometimes. I was like, no one knows, why should they listen to me, right? So the way we try to do this is like, let's get a local trusted community leader or someone that they already listen to, and then let that person be kind of the project's voice. And we're kind of in the background, kind of connecting the pieces and trying to provide the technical expertise to build the solution. We have templates and plans and all those things that we use, but usually we work with the community and someone that kind of plays that role of in the tech world, we used to call them like the super user, someone that's really going to kind of disseminate that technology throughout the organization. So we kind of use the same concept to the community events. And then in Long Beach, we got really lucky. There's this great gentleman, Jerry Schubel. He was the president of the Aquarium of the Pacific, and he lives in the neighborhood that we're discussing. So he invited his friends and neighbors, like, hey, come all over here. Let's have a conversation about this. And that process was really well thought out, where we had, I think, 3 first meetings. There were hearing meetings where we just bring the residents, say, hey, is this something you're worried about? Do you understand the issue? And then bring someone maybe to present and talk about it. And then the VR kind of naturally integrated into that process through some of the events. So that was a big finding, and I try to replicate that as much as I can. In Turner Station, it was similar. We have a gentleman called Larry Bannerman. He was one of the leaders at the conservation teams in Turner Station, and he really got into the project, and he got so excited about it that he ended up being the narrator of the experience. So when you put it on, you hear Larry talking about the project, and he went off, bought a headset, and he takes it out to his friends and he shows people. He's really passionate about it. And that has a much bigger impact than if I show up at an event or someone that's not in that community. Mm-hmm. Here in Santa Cruz, also we use a local activist for the Spanish voiceover, Ernestina Saldaña. So people know her. So when they hear her voice, it immediately is like, okay, it's Ernestina. So let's hear what she's gonna tell us about. So I think having those connections, and it takes time. Sometimes, if they're not there, we have to build that. And then I find that the projects are most successful when there's that strong local presence, because then I think it adds, let's see if I can say that word, legitimacy to the project. They become like champions. So they really, and we include some cultural, like in nuances in appropriate ways. So I think it's important to think of those things as well.
Got it. Okay, so what you're talking about is that you not only need to find, one, it's a slow building relationship over time. 2, you got to find some sort of thought leader, champion, dude, woman, person in that space that is going to, spearhead it, drive it, tell all their friends about it, and get incredibly excited about the whole process. I want to just flip it back to the Long Beach. So the guy was the president of the aquarium.
Yeah,
so
Pacific.
So then he's got that affinity for the ocean and being connected with all that, and then could kind of show this is what happens when sea level rises and everything. Okay, so then in terms of that, do you guys like establish like a result? Like, okay, we hope to get this with the community. So you guys show it the community, and then what happens when they get awareness, and let's say there are a lot of motivations. I just want to focus on one of these Long Beach, one specific thing. What about the Long Beach? Was there hoping to get something from that, a result, a response from the community?
Yeah. And that's something that's just starting to happen too. I think a lot of these projects that we worked on to date, I think the goal was to get the conversation started. And in Long Beach, we had a big goal, which was, if you look at the Long Beach Peninsula, it's very low lying. It's like with under a foot of sea level rise, which is, it could happen in the next 30 to 60 years. The half of the neighborhood is permanent inundated. Like it's and when we looked at VR, another unintended kind of result is that when you look at the flooding in an animation, you can see, if you're looking down, you can see the beach on the bottom of the screen, but then there's a bay on top, and you can see the waters kind of come from the top down. So you see it flooding from behind the neighborhood, and then which led us to think, well, if you build a seawall here, it's not going to make any difference because the water is going to go around, and then it's going to get trapped by the seawall. So we have to think of ways. But one of the goals of that experience was to first look at, or the whole project, I should say, the experience was part of it. But one of the goals of the project was to come up and learn about how to have this difficult conversations with residents in a way that we don't alienate them, we don't create, that they're still open to hear what the options are. And one of the options, like in the long run, it may not be possible to keep these houses here, because it might be too expensive, and it just is going to cost too much money. I don't know, can we afford or not? That's something that the neighborhood will have to decide. But just that, let's talk about that as an option without creating a huge commotion, which is what typically ends up happening in some other places when that process is not well thought out. So can we talk about long-term impacts of some of these issues with the residents in a way that they stay engaged, they take some ownership of the process? And at that, we succeeded because everyone stayed through the whole series of meetings. And that was one I was looking earlier today, and I was really surprised. It's one of our most successful, even VR apps. I think between the Oculus Go and the Quest, it's on the App Labs.
What's the name of the app?
Sorry?
You said it's one of the most successful apps. What's the name of the app?
It's the Sea Level Rise Explorer Long Beach. It's on the App Labs store and also at the Oculus Go. And I believe it's on the SideQuest store as well. I can send you links to that. But the Long Beach one, between the Go and the Quest, got over 4,000 installs, which I was like, we didn't do like a massive campaign or anything. We did a press release, and so people are finding it and going through that. So I find that's great.
That's
but the
awesome.
long term,
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're saying, no, go ahead, and I'm going to say a thing after you complete it.
Okay.
So you're saying the long-term effects are what?
So the like what happens with folks that go through that after those initial conversations and those projects, it's something that we're tackling next. So there's something that when we get engaged, when we get, like in Santa Cruz, there were after the VR was at the public library, and we had some launching events. After that, the city has a series of engagement events. And so they get invited to come to, talk to the city. They provide feedback. They give their opinion. Should we do, the Santa Cruz actually has 3 survey questions built into the VR experience. So people say, hey, do you think that building a seawall to protect the Santa Cruz boardwalk is a good idea or not? So they're collecting some data as input for the long-term planning. And the people, they put down their emails, so they continue to get communications from the city. But we are not actively tracking what happens after the projects are gone yet. We're improving the analytics a little bit, but and especially since we want to get a lot more of those things done, I think it's really up to each project and community to run with it and use it in the best way possible, and to maintain that.
Got it. And with you're talking about wanting to set up the analytics and the tracking and seeing what's going on. I mean, what are the analytics that are important to you? You're talking about capturing emails. You talked about asking survey questions. What are the analytics you hope to put in place?
So I think that preferences towards some specific adaptation options, I think it's a really good thing to track. I think even the number of unique people that that run through these experiences, I think it's very valuable. We can now track where kind of the cities that they're on, but not any more details. So there's all the privacy things that we need to worry about with that. We're working on a really interesting proposal with kind of an economics game simulation where you go through 30 years kind of lifetime of a mortgage of a coastal town, and you see your house there, and then it's like every year you make a decision. Do you want to buy flood insurance? Or now I'm going to maybe upgrade my car instead. And then you go through this kind of yearly budget planning, and then you get you every year you see what could happen. And then in the end, people may, whoa, I lost my house, I went bankrupt, or oh, I made good choices and now I still have some equity here. And on that one, we're going to track how different kind of economic incentives could change their decisions. Are they better off if you frame things in different ways? So trying to understand really human behavior through some of these experiences and try to get to some of those things. I think that would be really interesting to see as well.
That's awesome. And you talked about before the start of the podcast, you want to get people aware, but you also want to get paid and engaged. You want them to really kind of do this type of stuff. If somebody had interest in this and they wanted to go and create their own thing or have some sort of way that they can feel like they can have impact, how would they get started in something like this?
Yeah, I think one of the first, I love people to contact me anytime. We have a lot of free content that they could get started with, and it's using and sharing and talking about it with their colleagues and friends and family. But also, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, getting engaged with a local issue or something that they're passionate about. I think that would be great. And creating that community, right? If you find a friend or someone that's also interested in that and you go together, chances are much higher that you're going to stay engaged and it's not going to be a bummer. Try to make it fun in a way. I love drones. I like video games. So how can I combine these things? And I like engaging with people about these issues. But I also like to, lock myself in the closet for 3 days to recharge after those things. So how can I balance all this, in a way that I'm not going to burn out in another, 3-4 years? And so try to find those little things that you enjoy and find something you're really passionate about. Don't I'm going to, I really like art, but I'm going to quit my job and going to work on climate change. Don't ever do that. Just use your skills and apply it to the issue that you're passionate about. And I think that's how we can get people to sustainably stay engaged with some of these things.
It's funny that you're talking about sustainability, but not only sustainability for the planet, but sustainability for the individual is trying to create a sustainable planet. So
yeah, I talk to students about it. I have a kind of I want to incorporate more, but I have like half a class when we talk about, it's about an hour, we go through what's your personal resilience plan, and it's an environmental policy program. So it's like, well, it's a tough career here you guys are choosing. So like, how are you going to stay sane through this? What do you like? And do things like go for a walk, meditate, exercise, eat healthy, whatever it is that keeps you going. Just make sure that you create a routine and maintain it in a way that that's not easy, right? But it's practice.
The resilience for yourself, so you can make a more resilient planet. What do you, for yourself personally, what do you consider your superpower to be?
Oh, my superpower. I don't know if it's a superpower or if it's like lucky or luck or a combination of both. But I've been with the last few years, I've been very fortunate to connect with, a lot of really smart people on top of their game that are doing things that when we combine all that amazing expertise, we're able to create something that's having an impact. So just creating that multidisciplinary team around an issue, I think it's been fantastic. Having a cognitive psychologist, a script writer, digital artist, and all like folks that our team never worried about sea level rise, didn't know anything about climate change. There are a lot of young kids that are coming from video game design colleges, right? So bringing them into this, and now they're all passionate about it, and they're well versed, and they're applying those amazing skills to some of these things. So I'd say kind of connecting with folks in a way that, or finding these folks and engaging with them. I think it's been, we wouldn't be nowhere near where we are without that. So.
Got it. So then one of its like superpowers really, building the team around the purpose and then getting that to move forward. And when you're talking about the team, like this is all nonprofit stuff. These people are doing this out of just the desire to see the impact. You guys are all kind of working on this. I want to say part-time, but you're doing this out of passion, not actually out of it's not like a business per se. So a lot of these people they're showing up because they believe in the project.
That's right. And we never turn anyone away for lack of budget. that's another thing that I'm proud of. It's like, well, if you have I'll come and talk to you. I'll give you all our apps for free. If you have a little bit, we'll maybe get someone to fly a drone and do 360 image that you can show around, and maybe, or if you have a bigger budget, we'll do a whole VR, mobile, web-based experience. We'll bring in, animators. We did this one really great project. It's a class about marine protected areas for mid-schoolers here in California. And that we have an animated sea lion. Her name is Marina, and it's a 10-minute experience on the quest. They use their hands to, find different species underwater, and it was amazing. And it's tied to the curriculum here. So we could go from, hey, I have zero to I have all this. It's like we'll work with anyone. So I think that's been, but it is. I mean, we are a for-profit business, but we everything that we make extra, we kind of, okay, let's do a wildfire project now pro bono, just to make sure that because that's something that was important to us, and so we kind of went there. And we have a sea level rise game that we're developing, and it's something. I don't know if you know a game called Unrailed. It's like a multiplayer. It's like 4 people play together, and this train is coming, and you got to mine resources and build the track. Otherwise, they're gonna, you die. So we kind of built something kind of with that feeling where the sea is coming, and you got to move sand to the front to protect the houses, and then you put some rocks, and eventually you got to get the houses back. So we've been kind of finding creative ways and interesting ways to talk about these issues, and in ways that inspire people again to do action without feeling like, oh my God, this is hopeless. It's not. I mean, there's things that we can do. It's like the future is not set in stone, right? So anything that we do is going to make it better in the end. So no reason to sit around and wait.
Yeah, no, I mean, I gotta say on that note with that is, what advice would you give to people? Because I know people get panicky. Oh God, it's all is lost. It seems to be either bury my head in the sand or freak out and get overwhelmed by the cause of things. And you're talking about kind of sit in that center area. I mean, what advice would you give, around that topic?
Yeah, I think I'll and it's not like you're always in any one of these states permanently. Right. There are days where like I just want to bury my sand in my head on the sand. It's like, okay, this is it. Don't talk to me about this because it's going to be very depressing. And there are days like, oh, this is great. I'm super optimistic. We can totally do that. So it's kind of navigating through those states. I think it's key. And through my interactions with my psychologists and colleagues, and I'm learning to accept those feelings when they come. Just sit with them and like, okay. This is important. I'm not going to kind of put like the pink glasses on and pretend it's not happening. So it's like it's part of it. But I go back to finding what you're passionate about already, and then tying it up with that. So if you're worried about climate and you have some project that you're really passionate about, just make that more climate friendly, and try to look at alternatives to make it your impact kind of diminish that, and that you feel better about that. And I was reading about this, that if you do little actions, it's like when you're playing games and the dopamine kind of hit comes. That's the same thing. It's like if you do a little action, you educate someone, or you shared something with someone that you feel good about it, and that makes you want to do more of it. So I think tapping into that, I think it's key, right?
Yeah, it sounds like the gamification piece. And with all the things that you're doing here, what's your holy grail? What's your hopes for the work that you do with Virtual Planet and everything? What's your flag in the sand thing, the big thing that you seek?
So there are a couple of things. I think one is really democratizing the use of technology in climate communication, specifically immersive solutions. And it doesn't have to. I mean, VR is great, but we don't have enough headsets out yet that everyone can experience this. So we always have an accompanying like 360 film. You can look through your phone or on the computer. So really get as many cities as possible to start using some of these things to help with their local policy decisions and climate adaptation. And that's where sea level rise, wildfires, or urban heat, any other issues that you're working on. So that's a one side. On the other thing that I'm really interested and passionate about is research. So we have the partnership with the team at Stanford. We published a paper last year where it's kind of an overview on how we're using VR in the 3 sea level rise projects that we did at Turner Station, Long Beach, and Santa Cruz. So I'm really interested in figuring out the role of technology in communicating some of these issues in ways that reduces science politicization and polarization and some of the issues that we're facing. So one of my ideas is to find the most conservative, anti-climate community in the country and build an experience for them. And maybe we don't mention climate change. We look at some past events. So how can we communicate some of these issues to some folks in a way that they will end up getting engaged and adapting and helping with the climate crisis? So advancing research on one end, but also getting more people stoked and working with VR and immersive tools on these issues, and always looking for the solutions and what can we do to implement these things.
Got it. So yeah, the democratizing of the technology to help people change the hearts and minds, local communities, facilities, groups, municipalities, and also if you could try to find some really anti-climate change people and be able to create something, convert some hearts and minds, a big win in that one, as well. If that is if that's the overall arching holy grails per se, what's the big dragon? What's the thing that's the greatest challenge for you to face that you don't know if you're going to be able to overcome, or it's just going to be in general the greatest challenge for you to overcome in order to make this thing possible?
Yeah, I think I can do it. I really do. I think it's maybe time is a big challenge here, because I love to do all these things together, but also we have to run the business. There are all the background things that need to happen, and we need to invest on that as well. So one of the challenges, I think, that I get so excited about the projects that I just want to work on the projects all the time. But then you got to kind of, okay, wait a minute, there's bills to be paid, there's taxes to be filed, and all those things. So I think that next step of growth that's going to be, I think, really critical. It's coming. It's just that I get a little anxious that, we should be there or not. But I'm trying to be mindful of my time, my availability, and be kind to myself and say, yeah, it will get there in time. So I learned a lot through the pandemic. It's like, well, we don't need to be hurrying all the time. There is an urgency here, but if I go too fast, it's not, again, sustainable. I have to keep using that word, but you really have to create a solid foundation that's going to stick around so we can do all this offshoot. So I think time and my own kind of patience is, I think, are the biggest challenges there. Okay.
I understand. Yeah, as an entrepreneur, that makes a lot of sense.
Relate, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So this has all been wonderful, and thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you?
Just a couple of really cool projects we're working on. We're starting a large project in West Palm Beach in Florida, so I'm looking forward to that. So we're going to look at the impacts of sea level rise at a couple of the community parks there, with the focus on equity and inclusion. So that's something interesting. We're about to launch an experience here in Santa Cruz, which is called Creating Safe Passage, which is we're showing what a tunnel under the highway would look like for animals to safely cross from one side of the other. And there's mountain lions, and so it's a really cool project I'm excited about. And then urban heat, it's another one that's coming up for Cleveland, and we looked at that, and that was a really I just want to tell that story real quick too, because it's something that touched all of us in the project, where our scriptwriter Gustavo wrote a really interesting piece about the urban heat and air quality. And the way that he chose to tell the story is through a standpoint of a teenager that grew up in a neighborhood. And it's a teenager that has respiratory issues. He's got asthma. And he says on the script, I went to the emergency room many times. I can't ride my bike because it's too hot. So, and then we always try to work with local folks at the communities that we're developing this experience for. And then we came across this teenager, Abdullah, that was the voiceover for us. He's an actor. And so when we met him the first time, he was reading the script and it's like, oh, guys, this is my story. So it was something we're almost all crying at the end. It's like, he was like, I have asthma. I had no idea it was related to heat and because of air quality. And I've been to the emergency room. All my friends, I have 5 of my 6 close friends, all have this issue. The only thing you guys got wrong is that I don't ride a bike, I skateboard. But today I wanted to skateboard here to the studio at the library. And it's like, I couldn't because it is really, really hot. So I couldn't do it. So that was something like we
Wow.
and you think it's like a rare thing, but it's not. It's such a big issue in that neighborhood and in some areas of town that we're like, oh my God, this is. So we hope that's going to resonate with a lot of the locals, and the city is working. Cleveland is working really hard to plant more trees, and so that is all tied up with their transportation plan. So it's a great synergy there. But just having that, I don't know what it was, but it was really interesting when we got that kid that was doing the voiceover of a kid, that it was kind of that mirror thing that was really
it's definitely going to resonate with one kid for sure, and generally if you get one you're going to get more. That's pretty funny. And just might
right.
switch that bike for a skateboard. That's pretty cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing.
Yeah. And Juliana, if people want to get a hold of you and find out more about your work, what do they need to do to make that happen?
Oh, just email me, juliano.calil@gmail.com or juliano@virtualplanet.tech or LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk to people and discuss and see what's happening near your community, and we'll make something work. I think it's a great discovery process too, and it's and producing these things, it is a fun project. It's a tough issue to deal with, but going through writing the script, flying the drones, getting the models, creating the materials, putting it all together, getting the voiceover, it's a really interesting thing to go through. Just a quick note on that, on the Highway 17, someone suggested it was a game or two in the team. Said, well, I really like Cortana's voice. Can you find someone that sounds like her? And we did, so it was great.
That's awesome. Juliana, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show. Have a blessed and beautiful day, my friend. I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds great. See you on the other side.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on the other side.